I love to tell the story of unseen things above, of Jesus and His glory, of Jesus and His love. I love to tell the story, because I know 'tis true. It satisfies my longings as nothing else can do. I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old, old story of Jesus and His love.
True story. Years ago, the church we attended was having a meeting with some other churches where people who taught Sunday school, led the choir, did all the various leadership things in the church, got together and they had seminars. So we were driving to the seminar and there were 5 of us in the car. I was driving, and there were 3 people in the back seat. One of them was a young lady. The young lady's name, I'm going to use Nancy. Nancy was in the back seat as we were driving down the road, and along the way, somebody else in the back seat said to Nancy, "Isn't that the convenience store?" As we were driving by a small convenience store with the gas pumps out front, "Isn't that the convenience store?" And she said, "Yes, it is." And of course, being of the curious nature that I am, I said, "What convenience store?" And Nancy said, "That's the convenience store where my brother was murdered." On a Memorial Day, her family, her parents and brothers and sisters and their families were all gathered together at the parents' house. And the mother said, "We're running out of hot dog buns, so go get some hot dog buns." And the son said, "Okay, I'll go do it." He went into the convenience store and walked in on a robbery as it was taking place. And he was shot and killed in the convenience store. And so we had some discussion about that. She could talk about it really easily, so we continued to talk. And anyway, the statement that she made that stuck in my mind was, "That doesn't bother me anymore. I have forgiven him. I have forgiven the guy who shot my brother and killed him." Now, that's not an easy thing. Could you do that? Well, we're going to talk about vengeance this morning. And you have to look at some pretty tough things if you're going to talk about this topic in a serious way. So we're going to look at a tough one also in the story we're going to tell. I was telling Walter in the beginning that I once saw this story described as the story that you'll never hear told in Sunday school. So that's too much for me to pass up. We have to tell it in Sunday school. But it is a good story with a good message, an important one that I need to be reminded of on occasion, and I suspect that you do as well. What happens when somebody hurts you or somebody you love?
You get angry.
You get angry. Angry is one of the first responses, isn't it?
First thing, get even.
Get even. Those are 2 of the very first responses that it's natural for a human being to have. You're going to have the feeling. Get angry, mad at somebody for hurting you or somebody that you love. And then the idea will probably cross your mind about how you're going to get even, or maybe do better than that. Maybe they deserve a little bit more than they gave. But how else might somebody respond? Forgiveness, like Nancy did, right? Forgive the person who caused that tremendous hurt.
Not right away.
For most folks, probably not. Because, again, the natural inclination that we have, the natural inclination is for the anger and the get even and to do that. And so even for the person who is the most righteous person that you know, the person who is as close to Christ as anybody that you know, still is a human being and still has the flesh and still is going to be burdened by that flesh on occasion. And when somebody hurts them or hurts someone that they love, it's going to be natural to have that feeling come creeping in. So it probably will happen to just about everybody. And to the extent that we let that stay, it's going to take longer, isn't it? The longer we let that hang on, the longer we feel that anger, the longer we look for those ways to get even, then the farther away forgiveness is. So why do we look for a way to get even? Why do we want revenge when somebody hurts us or somebody that we love?
You want that other person to hurt.
All right, so we want to make them suffer. What else?
We feel like we're the only ones who can do it the right way.
Okay, you have to do it with enough emphasis in the right places, right? And we know how to do that. Why else? I mean, I want to get back to the root source. I mean, we want justice, right? Certainly. We always want justice for the other guy, right? We want the other guy to have justice. We want grace. Okay. All right. So we would like for the other person to understand that they have done something wrong and perhaps get better, improve by this. What else? Why do we want all those things? I mean, why would we actually seek revenge? Now, if I'm actually going to seek revenge, I'm probably not too much interested in him understanding. I just want to beat up on him or to hurt him. But why is that? I mean, what is it in me that makes me want to do that?
The devil made me do it.
The devil made me do it. Well, there's some of the devil in there making that happen. That's true. What else?
Self-satisfaction.
Self-satisfaction. All right, we're getting closer to it now. But it is, the self comes in here, and it is a matter of pride. I think it's our pride that's driving us for that revenge. Because we're special, and for somebody to hurt us or to hurt the people that we love just cannot be justified. And therefore, because they're hurting me, I have to do something about it. And so my pride will not allow that other person to go scot-free. My pride will not allow him to walk away unscathed. He needs to pay the price. And maybe he'll learn something along the way. What was the law on revenge before the Mosaic Law? Eye for an eye. That goes back to the Hammurabic Code. Hammurabi was the king of Babylon about 100 years before our story begins. So Abraham came out of the area of Babylon, but Hammurabi was a couple hundred years after Abraham. But he's several hundred years ahead of Moses. Hammurabi is several hundred years ahead of Moses. And so the principle in Babylon, and the area controlled by Babylon, which at this point in time is a lot of the world, this is a 7.5-foot stele. The stele is a granite monument, and if you look closely up, get up close, and you can see the writing on there, and those are the laws of Hammurabi. And one of the laws deals with revenge, and it is an eye for an eye. And the purpose of that is to not let the revenge go beyond the hurt that the person caused. It's not 2 eyes for an eye, or an eye and an arm for an eye. It's an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It is not to let the revenge go beyond the damage that the person has done, because we are inclined to do that, aren't we? I mean, if they do this to me, then they deserve just a little bit more. But if you let that go on, then that person looks back at you and says, well, they did this to me, so they deserve more. And so you keep this thing escalating until the whole world is blind and dead. You kill everybody off eventually if you don't let that stop. Code of Hammurabi, which was probably pretty well established in most of this area at the time of our story this morning. What's the difference between vengeance and justice? You know, sometimes we'll say when we're going out for revenge, we just want justice.
Anger is usually involved with vengeance.
Yes. It's more personal, isn't it? The vengeance is a personal thing. With justice, what guides the justice? I mean, what controls justice? Yeah, there is some legal system in place, isn't there? I mean, if I want justice, I want things to be in line with these rules. Just as we're justified, we're in line with Christ. For justice, you want everything to be lined up with the code of ethics, the codes of laws, like Hammurabic Code or the Mosaic Law or whatever. If you want justice, then everything needs to be in tune with, in line with, justified with that code. But with vengeance, I'm not necessarily guided by that code. I'm guided more by my feelings. Just how do I feel about being hurt this way? So they're not the same thing.
Vengeance, you might not trust that they would get justice.
Oh, yes. In fact, that kind of brings us to the next point. See, I learned this word when I was a youngster watching cowboy movies, right? And TV shows with cowboys. And the vigilantes would go out there and fix things. The vigilantes would do it. What is vigilante action? Where, for whatever reason, they don't trust the law, they don't have enough law around, but they just go out, they're going to take it in their own hands. They are the sheriff, they are the prosecutor, the executioner, they do it all. It simplifies matters tremendously, doesn't it? Just go for it and get it solved. Well, isn't that what we want when we want vengeance? Trying to solve it our way, on our time frame, and get it done for our satisfaction. Exactly right. So when is this vigilante action appropriate? That may seem like a superficial question, but it's really pretty serious. We'd all like to know an answer to that where we can know when we can have vengeance, when we can go out there and take revenge on somebody. Down deep, doesn't everybody kind of want that? Isn't that part of the human response? We just said earlier that everybody has that human response of anger and wanting to get even when they get hurt. Well, what we're looking for here is, when we're asking the question is, well, when can I do it? Everybody kind of wants to, so when can I do it?
We feel like it's justified.
All right, that's what we'll tell ourselves. If we feel like it's justified, then it's okay. But is there, in fact, any place where this vigilante action is appropriate? In politics? Politicians certainly think so, don't they?
Where there was no one to carry out the law.
Right. So, and that's what the cowboys, the cowboys on the frontier, when the marshal was dead or out of town, so the citizens then had to, and there was no deputy, there was no law enforcement. There were laws, but there was no enforcement. So they took things into their own hands and made sure that it happened. Depending upon how they handled that, it may have been appropriate, but they may have made it inappropriate pretty quickly by going too far. Anyway, interesting question. This one, let's take the assumption to be absolutely true at the moment. If God permitted our hurt. So something has happened, you've been hurt, God permitted that. And if God permitted your hurt, then how could we justify seeking revenge? When you phrase it like this, it really is a different question for you, isn't it? If God is permitting something to happen, then what are you saying when you say, I'm going to take revenge on the person who did that?
You're taking it out of God's hands.
Taking it out of his hands. He really didn't do it right, did he? He kind of messed up. And it's up to us to fix it. Isn't that really what we're saying? If we're going to take revenge on something that God has allowed in your life, then we're saying, God, you messed up and I'm going to fix it.
When you're interrupting God's plan because you don't know what he's going to do about it.
So that's the one I want us to focus on as we look at the lesson this morning. Anybody see the movie The Interpreter? It's with Nicole Kidman is Sylvia Broom, who's an interpreter at the UN. It's a 2005 movie, PG-13. It's a thriller. It's a good movie. After it was over, I tried to think of how many times I heard bad language in it, and I would have guessed less than a handful. So the language is very tame. You'll see the same stuff on TV today, so on broadcast TV, so can't get away from it. But I found out that actually different words were used in there 12 to 15 times. So it's more than I could remember. I'm making that point because the way that language is used, it's not used for an effect. It's just used as the natural language in that situation for the kinds of people who are in the situation. Something that you would likely hear, and you're not surprised when you hear it. But anyway, so there is some language in there. Sexual content, none. There's going to be a male lead and a female lead, but there's no sexual tension between them, so you don't get any of that. There is some violence in the beginning, and you'll see why as we look at what the story is about. The other lead is Sean Penn. In this one, he's very good. The acting in this is very, very good. The script is good and tight. It's a thriller, so there are lots of twists and turns, and there'll be stuff happening in the first half that you won't understand until you get near the end. But it's well done, and you get all your answers eventually, but you'll keep asking questions as you go. Sean Penn is with the Secret Service. Tobin Keller with the Secret Service, and the responsibility of his group in the Secret Service is to protect visiting dignitaries. So if a president of another nation comes to UN to visit, then his group would provide protection for them while they're in the United States. The main focus of the attention in the movie is on someone that you won't see in the clip that I'll show, but it's on the president of an African country, Matobo. Matobo is a fictional country. There is no Matobo, Africa country. However, there is a Matobo city, and there is a Matobo National Forest in Zimbabwe. Now, there's a little irony here. Matobo is the country, Zwane is the president. You may recall a President Mugabe of Zimbabwe. And Zwane, the character in the movie, is very much like the real Mugabe because he went in as a real hero. He replaced a vicious dictator who was really causing great harm to the people. He was a hero of the people and had a revolution, took control of the country, and then almost immediately became like his predecessor, just as bad as the guy before. A lot of ethnic cleansing, killing all of his enemies. And that's Zwane. In fact, Zwane is so bad that the United Nations, which is where Sylvia is a translator now, United Nations is considering bringing him in and taking him before the ICC, the International Criminal Court in The Hague, for crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing. So he's a bad guy. Now, you're going to see one person that I mentioned very quickly. Zwane's the security chief, Niels Lute. The real hero of the movie is Nicole Kidman, Sylvia Broom. It's important to note that she grew up in Matobo. As a child, she grew up in Matobo. Her parents were killed, murdered, and her younger sister, murdered in Matobo. She was 12 or 13 when it happened. She moved away, got an education. She speaks 8 languages and became an interpreter at the UN. So what's going to happen is that while she's at the UN, she overhears a conversation. She's working late one night. She overhears a conversation down on the General Assembly floor of a plot to attempt an assassination of Zwane. Now, she's from the country, has left the country. She's well aware of everything that he's done. She's now an interpreter at the UN. She hears of an attempt to assassinate him. So she reports this, and of course then Sean Penn's going to come in to talk with her. All this is from the first half of the movie, so I'm not going to spoil the movie for you in any way. If you want to watch it, it's a good movie to watch. Niels Lute, the security chief, is going to talk with Keller, the investigator for the Secret Service, about what he has learned about Sylvia in her life in Matobo, while Sylvia's taking a lie detector test.
Is your name Sylvia Broom? Miss Broom?
I found out something from our domestic intel. All this may have begun with a tragic accident.
What do you mean?
Her parents had a farm in the Mukwa Mountains. This area became infested with rebels in the 80s, and Dr. Zwane was forced to mine the roads. Her parents were bringing her younger sister back home from school. Land Rover hit a mine.
And they were killed?
All of them.
How old was she?
12, 13.
Are you now in New York?
Yes. Something like that. Even years later could incite all kinds of ideas.
Keller meets with Sylvia to really get after her about this situation. This is a discussion of vengeance.
What are you not telling me?
What are you accusing me of?
How do you feel about Zwane? Never mind, I don't care for him.
I feel disappointment.
That's a lover's word. What about rage? Of all the people that I've looked into since this thing started, the one with the darkest Zwane history is you. It was his landmines that killed you.
Shh. We don't name the dead. Everyone who loses somebody wants revenge on someone, on God, if they can't find anyone else. But in Africa, in Matobo, the coup believed that the only way to end grief is to save a life. If someone is murdered, A year of mourning ends with a ritual that we call the Drowning Man trial. There's an all-night party beside a river. At dawn, the killer is put in a boat, he's taken out on the water, and he's dropped. He's bound so that he can't swim. The family of the dead then has to make a choice. They can let him drown, or they can swim out and save him. The coup believe that if the family lets the killer drown, they'll have justice but spend the rest of their lives in mourning. But if they save him, if they admit that life isn't always just, that very act can take away their sorrow. Vengeance is a lazy form of grief.
My wife was killed 2 weeks ago. She was a dancer. The guy was a dancer, too. Eddie. Great dancer. A lousy driver. The only way he knew how to stop a car was to slam it into a bridge abutment in Santa Fe. The thing is, if he had lived, and I had a choice, I think I wouldn't let him drown. I might have even held his head under the water.
There are several things in there that I'd like to talk about, but we won't have time to do it all. But this quote I found intriguing. Vengeance is a lazy form of grief. At first glance, I might have been inclined to kind of write it off, but I think there's a lot of truth in it. Vengeance is a lazy form of grief because when we are grieving over something, vengeance is natural, isn't it? The feeling of wanting vengeance is what the natural man is going to provide you without any effort whatsoever. And to wallow in the vengeance is, in fact, just a lazy form of grief. You don't have to do anything. It'll be there. Grief will produce the desire for vengeance. If you don't do anything, it's there, and you're going to wallow in it. The forgiveness that we've talked about, how easy is that? Sometimes you'll see somebody who is able to forgive something very serious very quickly, what you think is very quickly, but they didn't get there easily. I mean, we get to that point in our lives where we're able to forgive something tragic in our lives only through a growth in us that's going to take a long time. So we don't get there in an easy manner. It's hard work. God's going to do a lot of things to us and in us and through us to get us to that point. And so I think there's a lot of truth there. Vengeance is a lazy form of grief. But when we're struck with grief, to get to the point of forgiving and removing this thought of vengeance, there's some good hard work involved in getting to that point. We're going to get down to Simeon, Levi, and Dinah, but to get there, remember God made a covenant with Abraham about the land. That was passed on to Isaac and then on to Jacob. And then Jacob went up to Uncle Laban's to get a wife, and he ended up with 2, Leah and Rachel. He ended up with 12 sons and a daughter. 6 of the sons were by Leah, and the daughter was with Leah. Dinah, the daughter, was the second youngest child, the youngest child by Leah, but Rachel had a younger child by the name of Benjamin. Benjamin was the baby of the family, but only a little younger than Dinah. Here you have basically the baby of the family, Dinah, and a girl amongst 12 boys. Okay, daddies, who've ever had a girl, how does she rank in the family? A girl in a family full of boys. Father is going to have a pretty strong tie to that young lady. So that's the situation. We have Simeon, Levi, and Dinah, same mother and father. The other 6 boys have the same father but a different mother. Then we have Jacob returning from Haran, which is up by the Euphrates River, coming down into the land, and he's settling in Shechem. When Abraham came down into the land, he came to Shechem also. Well, that's where Abraham first came into the land, at Shechem. Jacob comes here, and Shechem is in a valley between these two big hills that are called mountains, or in Israel. But they're just nice-sized hills in many parts of the world. But Shechem kind of sits in this valley. So this is where he comes. He pitches his tent there, and then he goes to the men who are in charge of this area, the men who have the control of this, and that's Hamor and Shechem. Well, wait a minute. It's the city of Shechem. Here's a kid named Shechem. The city of Shechem is several hundred years older than this kid. But how many children do you know named Brandon in the city of Brandon? So a Shechem and Shechem? Okay, so what? So when we use the word Shechem here, it could be city or it could be the young man. But Shechem is really the prince of the land. And so Jacob buys the property where he's pitched his tent, and he's settling in, but he does something else that's important. He builds an altar to his God, not to the gods of the people of Shechem, but to God, the creator of the universe. So he builds an altar there. So he set himself apart, but he's a part of the land in that he's living there amongst them. Now that we get to what's going to create the problem for us, and that's Dinah, at the age of 16, decides that she wants to mingle with the women of the land. So she decides she wants to go mingle. Leave the protection of the tent, leave the protection of the family, and go mingle with the people of Shechem. 16 years old. Been going on forever. And then the sad part happens. This is where Shechem sees her, thinks she is a great-looking young girl, and he rapes her. So you have the rape of Dinah, the 16-year-old daughter of Jacob, by Shechem, who is the prince of the land. They're the ones in control of this territory. Imagine how Jacob felt when the word came back to Jacob. Imagine how the older brothers felt. And that's why we're going to get into some issues. Now, but we learned something about Shechem. He was overcome by passion and lust, but he did a horrible, horrible thing. But then a nicer picture of him is painted, and he says that he loved her. Scripture says he was drawn to her, he loved her, and he wanted to marry her. And so he went to his father and asked his father to get permission to marry Dinah. Maybe he's saying, I did the wrong thing here, I messed up, and let's see if we can fix it. I want to marry this girl. I want to marry her. So a little better picture of him, but still he has done something horrible. And he has raped this young girl. And of course, when Jacob heard it, he was very distraught. But his sons were out in the field. They were not there at the time that the word got to him of what had happened to Dinah. But he was very, very distraught. Then the sons came back in from the field as soon as they heard. The word got out to them. They came back in. They were indignant and very angry. Well, everybody's angry. Now, this is a good opportunity for some vengeance, right? I mean, if everybody's mad, we're going to be looking for a way to get even or do more. Except if we remember the code of Hammurabi, we're going to say an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and no farther. We would not go beyond an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth. Hamor comes immediately to visit with Jacob and the sons. One of the things we'll just note at the beginning is there's no confession of guilt or anything here, but it's just a matter of politely asking for Dinah's hand in marriage for Shechem. He says, Shechem loves your daughter and he wants to marry her. And we're asking you, would you please give her hand to Shechem so that he may marry your daughter? And then, we'll do this overall. Our daughters will marry your sons and your sons can marry our daughters and we'll just live happily ever after right here. We'll all live together and be happy. And we'll just have intermarriage all the way. So they're proposing what seems like a reasonable solution to this. Let's make peace. Probably shouldn't have happened. It happened, but let's make it good this way. Then Shechem speaks up and he says to the brothers and to Jacob, I love her. Please give her hand to me that I may marry her. Only give the young woman to be my wife. I'll pay whatever you want to pay. Whatever bride price there is, I'll pay it. You just say what you want and it's done. Now, if you're one of the brothers or if you're Jacob, how are you looking at Shechem and Hamor at this point? What else could Hamor or Shechem do at this point? What else could they do for Jacob and the brothers and Dinah? There's no admission of guilt. But other than that, what else is there? No admission of guilt, no apparent remorse. But they're proposing as much as they can propose at this point, aren't they? And so now to basically ignore that is to say there's nothing that you can do. I will, in fact, deal with you. I will take vengeance. So if this is not acceptable, well, the brothers are going to say, well, it's not acceptable. We're going to deal with the vengeance issue now. The sons of Jacob answered, it's recorded how they answered, deceitfully. They answered deceitfully. So the brothers are going to respond to this proposal, but they're going to do it in a deceitful way. What they say is, okay, not a bad plan that you're giving us, but we cannot give one of our daughters to you because you are uncircumcised people. Everybody in our family is circumcised, and so we cannot give a daughter to an uncircumcised man. So what you need to do is all your men need to be circumcised. And if you do that, then we'll proceed with your plan, and our daughters will go to your men, and your daughters will come to our men, and we'll intermarry, and everything will be beautiful, just like you said. Only they don't mean it. So when we're angry and when we're seeking vengeance, then we'll go to whatever extreme we want to go or feel that we need to go to accomplish the destruction that we want to accomplish. And we'll lie in the process, just like they lied. So they answered deceitfully and said, okay, if you'll do this. Well, when Hamor and Shechem hear this, they think, that's not a bad deal. All they want is to do this. Well, they want us to go through the circumcision thing. All the males need to be circumcised. We'll do that. So everybody seems to be happy. Well, there's one thing about the Shechemites. They're, in essence, accepting some of the religion of Jacob and his family and putting aside their own gods in the image of that. And so as a result, they're showing that they're not too faithful to their own faith because they're willing to take on this other stuff as well. But they're saying, hey, this is a good deal. They go back and they sell it to their neighbors and everybody in town saying, look, we can intermarry and everything will be fine. We'll share the land. Everything will be wonderful. But there's another little insight given when they say, will not their livestock and all this great wealth that Jacob and his family had, we'll share. It's a good deal. So economically, this is a good deal and we need to do this. And so everybody agrees to do it. So they go through the circumcision. And this is where Simeon and Levi step up and vengeance takes hold. Simeon and Levi, after a couple of days, when the men are all sore and unable to fight, they go in and they kill Shechem, they kill Hamor, they kill all the males in the city. Now, how's that for revenge? There was a rape, horrible, horrible thing, and so we have to do better than that. We have to really inflict pain on these people, and so we're going to go in and we're going to kill all the males. So after they kill the males and they take Dinah out and they pillage the place, they take everything. They take the women and the children and they take the animals and all the possessions. And so they get into thievery here as well. So they're murderers and thieves. Now these are the sons of Jacob. Levi is the man from whom the priests will come for the nation of Israel. One of the things that is kind of hidden as you go through this, or you don't really notice unless you stop and think for a minute, is God's grace and mercy on this family. I mean, here, how horrible is this? What these people have done. And you can go back to Jacob and you can go back to Abraham and look at all the terrible things they've done. You can go forward to David and look at all the terrible things that David did. They were some pretty bad guys. But you know what? We're pretty bad guys and gals too. But see, that's the hope, isn't it? We know that God is a gracious God and He's able to take people like that and people like us and still accomplish what He wants to accomplish. As bad as we are, He can still do it. The vengeance is accomplished. Then a very important statement. Jacob says to Simeon and Levi, you have brought great trouble on me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my household. I mean, when word of this gets out to all the surrounding peoples, they're going to come and kill us all. Now, that's a big problem. Jacob recognizes it because God has made His promise to Abraham, made a covenant with Abraham. That covenant is passed along to Jacob, and Jacob is saying, now, look what you guys have done. We're all going to be killed because of what you've done. Is this plan of God going to be stopped right here because of your stupid actions? I mean, that's the question he's really raising. They are obviously grief-stricken because they respond by saying, what? And let these guys treat our sister as a prostitute? Never going to happen. We're happy with what we did. We did the right thing. And that's how we often feel once we've achieved a little vengeance. There's a little self-righteousness inside there where, all right, we did it the way we said we were going to do it, the way we wanted to do it. And God still showed grace and mercy. And the priests will still come from Levi. For us, Paul describes it as clearly as it can be described, I think, in Romans chapter 12. Repay no one evil for evil. Okay, What are the outs here? How do we get out of this one? That's about as clear as it can get, isn't it? Repay no one evil for evil. Verse 19, never avenge yourselves. So where's room for vengeance? Never avenge yourselves. Well, he's not through. Don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. First two are hard enough. And now he's saying, now when you get the evil, you overcome it with good. There's your challenge. There's your challenge. Then in verse 19, he explains this thing about vengeance, where he said, never avenge yourselves. Leave it to the Lord. Leave it to the wrath of God. He'll take care of it. God says in Isaiah 63, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Vengeance is his. It's not ours. Not ours. No room for vengeance in your life. No room for vengeance in my life. That forgiveness that is so hard and so necessary is still the answer. It is to overcome evil with good. So vengeance belongs to him, not to us. There is never an excuse for us to take vengeance. Everything that happens to us passes through God's hands. That's something that we have to hold on to. We don't think about that because it's a little hard to balance sometimes. We have a hard time coming to grips with that. We don't want to believe that. We want to think that really this is just an evil out of this evil person, and if we can act on it the way we want to act on it, we'll solve it. And when inclined to seek vengeance, whether we're seeking it on our own, where we're going to go out and take that action, or we're going to ask the government to do it, as we want the legal system to inflict vengeance for us, or if we're going to beg God to take vengeance on these people. None of that is overcoming evil with good, is it? Consider all the grace and mercy God has shown to you to get you to where you are today. But it's true for all of us, isn't it? He's had to show tremendous grace and mercy for us to get to this point. And we're not where we need to be yet. But just to get here, it's been tremendous. So how in the world can we be inclined to seek vengeance? It's not for us. We're to overcome evil with good.
I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme in glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love.